What's up, YouTube? Welcome to Koala Gardens. I'm so excited to have you here so that I can show you a little bit of some of what was happening here on Wild Koala Day. I actually had a few little technical issues. I had somebody who I gave my camera to. Yes, I did that. And she was to film the presentations, and unfortunately the camera stopped 8 seconds into filming my presentation, and so it wasn't there. Also, Uncle Gilbert declined to have us filming his presentation, and I want to totally respect that. I was able to film that little bit of his welcome to country that you saw in the first video, but I'm going to walk you through a lot of what happened on the day. It was a fabulous day. Koala Gardens is a wildlife sanctuary on private property where I'm working hard to protect and restore native habitat for koalas. Here's a quick look at our activity sheet for the day. So once we arrived and did all of the setup, the students were actually a tiny bit late and didn't arrive until 10 o'clock. And so they began with a quick introduction from all of us and the welcome to country, which was just absolutely beautiful. Then what they did was we had 4 activities going, and the students rotated between each of those activities. So we were on a pretty tight schedule for the students to be able to get to do each of the workshops. And I just want to stop for a quick moment and give a huge shout out to all of the amazing people that make what I do possible in the background. Do hop over and have a look at the options for becoming an In the Loop adopter or part of the Patreon family, because you get lots of exclusive inside information every month if you join supporting me that way. And it's very important that I acknowledge the Widjabul Waiable people of the Bundjalung Nation, on whose land I live, work and play. Now, the video that I put out on YouTube is free. We are heading up to having 1,000 videos that I will have uploaded soon. I'll talk about that more in the coming days. There will always be free video from Koala Gardens, absolutely always. If you can't adopt a koala or jump into any of those other Patreon options or whatever, you can, if you've got just a couple of dollars, throw it into the super thanks below, and it makes all the difference in the world. So for my presentation, we started over at the house on the back veranda, where I have some information set up, and I had a talk with the children about primary koala food trees, what I'm doing here on the property, some koala biology, and of course I give an important talk about how I count the koalas, document all of that, and identifying koalas by using the nose pattern recognition. This gave us a great grounding in some of the stuff about koalas and what's going on. And then we headed off and we went for a walk into areas 10, basically into... Then we went for a walk into area 10, where we were able to see both Wattle and Ellie. We had a pair of binoculars so kids could see them a bit closer. And look at these kids doing such a good job of combining a phone and binoculars to get a photo. Here's a photo of me leading one of the groups down into area 10, and that's us all looking up and seeing Ellie. It was a fantastic day to be able to actually interact with children and be able to do a walk and talk. Now, let's have a look at part of the presentation on toxic weeds. It was fascinating.
Tell us about the web. Well, maybe you can tell me about the web. Biology is a web. All living things are a web. We're part of the web. A very, very, very complex web. Nothing is standalone. We'll talk about koalas today a bit, but they're not standalone either. And nothing that I'll be talking about today is just like you've got a poisonous plant and therefore you've got an animal, therefore you've got a problem. It doesn't work like that. It's far more complex. So we're going to play around with that a bit. We're going to look at Aboriginal and First Nations use of plants, and not just our own people, but Indigenous peoples elsewhere, and how that ties in. I'm going to put it in a story format, and we'll see how we go. So what I'm going to do is kick off with, it's fallen on the ground. So who's got the pasture, native? Okay. Native, weed or pasture. This is the bunya nut. Okay. So the reason why I've got it here is not because it's toxic. The toxin in it's very quickly killed by boiling or heating in the coals. The bunya nut, and I was asking Uncle Gilbert, this morning about it, was a major driver of the social calendar of Aboriginal people pre-colonisation. In the hills around Lismore, around the showground, there were bunya nut growing there. They did not ever occur there historically. The seed was brought there from the Bunya Mountains by the Aboriginal people, as we can understand from the records, historical botanical records. And down on the showgrounds now was a meeting place. This seeds about every third or fourth year in a big way. And the Aboriginal people would gather together and feast on the bunya nut. And that was also a time of trade, social interaction, boy meeting girl, all those sort of things that happen when people get together. It's not poisonous. Okay, but this one is. This is Zamia palm cycad. It is dinosaur food. To stop dinosaurs eating it, it's one of the oldest plants on this planet. They produced a toxin. So keep away from me, dinosaurs. To this day, they still have a toxin in them. First Nations use. They used to crush this, soak it in a creek for many, many weeks, and Uncle Gilbert was telling me they made a flour out of it and make cakes. Don't ever try that one at home. There's been people killed trying it. The First Nations people knew exactly how to do it, and it became an important food source for them. Another important food plant, but toxic. Bracken. Kills more cattle in this area than any other poisonous plant.
Isn't that interesting?
Native? Good question. Bracken is found throughout the world. And blady grass growing just behind us here, it's the one, blady grass, it's one growing just outside here, is found right around the world. The seed, and in this case the spore, is so tiny that it's carried by winds into the upper atmosphere, and so is found in every country. So if climatic conditions are suitable for that particular part of that continent, it'll grow. And it's one of the first colonisers after a volcano. This is spores there in the atmosphere, down it comes. Bracken, the little shoots and fronds are eaten in the islands, eaten in Japan. The Aboriginal people ate the roots after processing. Small amounts. Stomach cancer in those nations, is quite common. Okay, where's my other Madagascar gone? Okay, Senecio madagascarensis.
Fireweed.
Hey, and guess where it comes from? Madagascar. Okay, how's this one spread, do you think?
Oh, that bloody plant. Pollen. Pollen.
Yeah, wind spread, but it doesn't go into the upper atmosphere, it just goes to the neighbour's place. Don't they love you?
That sounds about right.
Today.
Now,
But it's all connected. It's all connected. Everything we do on the land has consequences for elsewhere, particularly for downstream. So when you're looking at this landscape and having a look at what Katrina's doing here, putting trees back in, there's a lot of ecosystem services. Have you guys heard about that term before in ag? Some benefits to these sorts of areas, these conservation areas. Like water filtration, when the water lands here, it's not going to run off and erode. It's got lots of time to kind of absorb through the soil and run off into our waterways so they're not full of sediments. Another way is through the soil health, which is what we're going to look at today. So, like I mentioned right at the start, I'm going to be taking you through the most biodiverse part of the landscape, which is beneath our feet. In 1 teaspoon of soil, there is more biodiversity than we see anywhere in this whole landscape, which is pretty crazy when you think about a teaspoon. And a lot of that biodiversity is in the form of microorganisms that we can't even see. We need a microscope to see. Now, we don't have a microscope with us today, but we do have lollies and we do have our imaginations. And so we're actually going to act out some of these interesting relationships and the ways that plants access nutrients using the life in the soil. Are you guys ready? And there are lollies involved, so stay tuned. So, native plants particularly have developed the most incredible ways of accessing nutrients. Australian soils are some of the most depleted ancient soils in the world, which means our plants have had to develop some pretty amazing strategies for getting the nutrients that they need to survive. So let's look at this world through the life of one particular plant, and that will be you, sir. What is your name?
Ron?
Come up here, Ron. You're our plant for the day. Don't worry, you get a comfy chair and you get a pack of minties, so you'll be fine. Yeah. Now don't eat them until the end. All right, so Rowan is our plant here, and this is you, my friend. This is you right here, flowering. Right, so this is Rowan. Now what is going on here? What can you see about this plant? What's Rowan doing?
Growing.
He's growing. He's growing from the soil, which is holding him in place, and he's growing upwards. What colour is he?
Green, yellow, and brown.
Green, yellow, and brown. Now the active part of Rowan is green. And that comes from something called chlorophyll. Have you guys heard of chlorophyll before? Can you tell me a little bit about chlorophyll? Do you know? That's cool. Yep.
Yep. It the sunlight goes on the chlorophyll and then produces nutrients for the plant.
Amazing. Now that process, does anyone know what that process is called? Starts with photo. Nice. So photosynthesis is when a plant uses chlorophyll in its cells to take the energy from the sun, carbon dioxide from the air, and water to make glucose, well done, which is carbon. It's a soluble form of carbon. Soluble means that you can dissolve it in water, okay? So it takes carbon dioxide, which was a gas, and it's made into a liquid form. Why would he need carbon or glucose? Where would he use that? To grow. So the carbon actually goes into the structure of the plant, so the stems, the leaves, to build more solar panels. And the end game of any living thing, including this plant, is to reproduce, to create enough energy to set seed for them to then live again, for them to continue on. Okay? So that's your whole aim in life. It's pretty simple, Rowan. So you're putting all this carbon into your structure. As some of it dies as well. This is all old carbon that's going to die, but it's just as important, rots away and forms more nutrients in the soil. Now, there's 40% of this plant's carbon actually is in the root system. Why would he put so much into the root system? Why would he bother if the end game is to make seed and reproduce? Why on earth?
The more this grows, the more carbon I get.
The further
more water.
the further
The
you
further it grows.
Yep. So phosphorus comes from rocks. Now the plant cannot access this yet because it's in a locked up, it's not soluble, it's not water-based yet. But there's a particular fungi called a mycorrhiza fungi, which is now going to be you, my friend. So come on over here. Oh, so you can't? Okay, that's fine. No worries. Does anyone have media approval?
That's all right.
Yeah, you're right. Could you come on up and be my mycorrhiza fungi? Okay, so you are in the business of phosphorus. So you can come and sit here. And you're going to sit right in the plant roots.
Hey, friend.
There you go.
I'm the only reason why you're alive.
So, pretty much. Right, so you guys, you're going to live in the plant roots. Why would you want to be there?
Because his only purpose in existence is to serve me.
About sums it up.
I love this. Well, actually, no, that would be a parrot, that would be a different sort of relationship,
Not
like a
same thing.
parrotism or whatever. But you want carbon, you want energy, right? He's got heaps of that. What you can do and what your superpower is to crack open the locked up phosphorus in the rock with, and don't actually do this. Don't actually do this. Let's just pretend he's going to do this. He's going to spit on the rock with his highly acidic saliva, and he's going to break off. He's going to change the chemistry of that phosphorus into a soluble form. So all of a sudden, you've got this amazing store here, and now you can do an exchange with the plant.
Whereabouts is the phosphorus in the rocks?
It's in the actual minerals, right? So it's in the clays and the actual gritty part of the soil. It's all in it. We also have a free-moving fungus. So you're going to be our fungus. You're going to send out your crazy root hyphae, and you're going to capture some of these nutrients from the root system. Happy days. And then I'm going to come along as an amoeba and eat you, because I'm a crazy, gross amoeba thing that floats through the soil water and just consumes everything in my path, including your root system. But she spits at me and deters me from getting near you. So that's another reason why she's so important to have around, because she's like, stay off my plant roots. So again, these relationships can be quite beneficial. Now we also have these things called earthworms. Of course, you guys have seen worms before. And these are like the excavators of the soil world. They're the top of the food chain. And they are huge, and they move through the soil, creating these channels, and they gobble up everything in their path. And then, like every living thing, they defecate, they poo out all these nutrients. And you can actually see like worm poo in the soil. And that's just shockers full of minerals that are in a soluble form that the plant can then eat. So you can see that by taking all that carbon from the sunlight and welcoming friends using the dribble in the root system, the plant here, Rowan, has created a whole ecosystem of complexity and, you know, death and reproduction, and it's all happening. There's millions of creatures out there thriving in this substrate underneath us. And so that is the soil food web. And I guess the reason I'm talking to you about this today is because these relationships are natural. They are out here in this conservation area. This would be happening beneath us all over with these different trees and grasses and shrubs. What happens in a landscape when we simply add soluble phosphorus? And we go like this. Just pour on superphosphate.
Just die?
No.
Oh.
Not yet. Sometimes if you overdo it. But if,
Might be overdoing it?
well, I think that's a fairly measured approach. So say that's a nice, yeah, okay, that's better. So I've just poured on a whole bag of super onto your plant roots. You're going to love that, because you're just going to grow big and strong. And that NPK fertilizer you were talking about before, that's often added to pastures to get that kick, and ultimately to create the reproduction, the seed head, which is what we're wanting to farm often, right? And so you would grow big and strong, But what happens to this relationship here? It doesn't need him anymore, so off you go. Sorry, mate, you're no longer required because we've got free-flowing soluble fertilizer here that the plant's happy with. So he's actually not going to put out as much of that carbon into his root system because he doesn't need to. What about nitrogen fertilizer? Do you reckon she's needed anymore, the antibacteria?
No.
Off you go, my dear. All right, plant, well look, you're looking, you know, you're reproducing, you're setting seed, you're looking pretty strong, but you've lost all your friends, mate. You've lost all your friends. And so what happens when a hungry protozoa comes along to attack your roots, or a particular bug that can get into the root system? There's no defense because she's gone.
Language.
And so he is now under attack and he's more susceptible to disease because he doesn't have that balance in place, right? Also, that costs a lot of money to do that, okay? And in some circumstances, it's absolutely the right decision. Depends on your enterprise, depends on what you're trying to achieve. But it's worth noting that in natural systems, that is not required. And that is the importance of these sorts of areas in the landscape. They are rejuvenating sinks for carbon. They are rejuvenating sinks for these sorts of creatures in the landscape, which when it rains, they can flow on downstream and down to the flatter areas, the cropping areas or the grazing areas, inoculating those soils with these sorts of healthy organisms, yeah? Does that make sense? So let's just recap what we've learnt. We had a plant, his name was Rowan. He was growing in the soil and he was setting, yeah, I think you might have died by now.
Oh.
Thank you, sir. Go and sit back down. So Rowan was growing in the substrate. What was he doing? He was setting up green. What were you doing, Rowan? Sending up green shoots. Yep. And what was the word that we called, what was he doing to change, to fix, get some energy? What was that word? Yeah, photosynthesis, yeah. And this is going to be on your soil test, I think, so let's just recap so you guys can remember. So photosynthesis, which did what?
Let it grow, carbon.
Yep, got you some energy, mate. Yep, got you some energy in the form of carbon or glucose that he then used to create stems and leaves and solar panels so he could access more carbon. And then he also put carbon where?
In the root.
Underneath the ground, yep. And he did that, why? To attract friends. Does anyone want some lollies, by the way? Hopefully no one has any allergies to caramel. Oh, sorry, Bronski. There you go, mate. Some minties too. All right, cool. So what are the things that we're eating now? What nutrients were they? So we had glucose in the form of minties, carbon, and then we had nitrogen, and we had phosphorus. Has everyone got minty and a thing? Yep. And the importance of those two were to make Rowan grow big and strong so he could reproduce, but they weren't freely available in the soil in a soluble form. So what did he have to do to access them? What did you have to do to access them? Give me your wrappers, please. You have to make friends. Yep. And you set up. What was the name, boys? Come on, come closer, please.
Can I try this one for
Yeah.
caramel?
Yeah, of course you can. So what was the name of that relationship where they were both benefiting from each other? Symbiosis, nice. Symbiotic relationship, cool. So they were both getting something out of it. And then of course he was dribbling all of those nutrients into the soil and welcoming more soil life. And by doing that, locking up carbon into more complex forms and storing that carbon for hundreds of years. And why is that important? Why is it important to take the carbon out of the atmosphere and store it into the soil?
Cools the planet down.
Yep. Slows climate change and warming climate. Yep. So soil is actually one of the biggest carbon sinks, potential carbon sinks that we have. It is so important that we suck up as much carbon as possible in the form of trees and soil. So that process is extremely important. Yeah, nice work. So ladies and gents, that is like first year university biochemistry that you just did then. It's pretty complex, but it's interesting, right? And it's when you actually act it out like that and break it down, you can kind of see how it all operates. Of course, there's many other nutrients that you can go through. You can go magnesium, calcium, potassium. You mentioned potassium before. There's lots of different complex nutrients going on down there, but they're the main ones. So hopefully you can kind of see how there is a lot going on beneath our feet as well as all the biodiversity above us. And that soil, the healthy soil, supports what grows above ground. So it's really important to do things that protect the soil, keeping things growing, stopping.
I hope you enjoyed having a little look at some of the amazing things that the kids all learned about during Wild Koala Day at Koala Gardens in partnership with the Patoris Education Group and the Biodiversity Conservation Trust. You've reached the end of this video. Yep, you made it. So would you take a moment to make sure you did smash that like button and write in the comments below, they hold the future, because this younger generation certainly does. Thanks for watching. More great video coming up this month. And another way that you can think about us giving gifts to people is to adopt koalas from Koala Gardens. This is a great way of becoming involved. There's adoptions that you can do just as a yearly adoption. You adopt a koala for a year, or there's a couple of monthly options that give you all kinds of amazing extra things that you receive every month. So that in the loop, you get an email bulletin, and on Patreon, you get lots of perks, including a monthly bonus exclusive video.